Our first guest today is Chris McNaught. He is a lawyer with Jane Harvey Associates, and he has expertise in criminal and civil law. He is also being a federal prosecutor as well as a defense lawyer. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Peter.
My second guest is Ned Levitt. He is a lawyer, and by the way, you don't say attorney here in Canada, isn't that correct?
That's an American term.
As well as being a lawyer, he is also an entrepreneur. He has his own law practice in partnership. He is the founding partner of Levitt, Schechter, and Schnurr. Did I say that right?
Very well.
And he is an expert in business law and in franchising. Welcome to the show, Ned.
Thank you.
Before we get into speaking about law as a profession, let's speak a little bit more about yourselves. First of all, Chris, can you tell me, why did you choose law as a profession?
That's not an easy question. Everybody, I suppose, views themselves sometime in their life as a knight on a white charger on behalf of the little guy, but I don't think I had that highbrow motive when I first considered law. As I think I mentioned talking to you on another occasion once, I was about 30 feet below the Aegean, diving on an underwater archaeological dig, pursuing my National Geographic dreams, when it suddenly occurred to me that in the midst of all the silt, that perhaps classical education also included the law. And so I decided to come back and, as they say in England, read the law. I really had an academic interest in it. I had no Bay Street pinstripe dreams of practicing, and it's mere chance that I wound up, in fact, practicing law in various forms.
Then how did you prepare for the profession?
I avoided lots of other lawyers, and
to talk you out of it?
That's right. And I tried to keep my ideals relatively intact until I articled. And then, of course, we all see the reality of the situation. But it's not that cynical a process. And
when you first went into law school, did you know what type of lawyer you wanted to be, or was it all a general type of?
No, I would say that a lot of my college and high school experiences were formative in that area, though I did a lot of public speaking. I was on a lot of committees, the usual sorts of student bodies and governments. And of course, if you hold yourself out to the public at all, that's liable to push you perhaps a little farther towards the law than perhaps other professions. And as well, the public speaking perhaps directed me towards debating, and that again led me more towards courtroom type of law. Actually getting up, opening your mouth, sweating under the tension, and dealing with the judge's directives, seeing what you can do for somebody under pressure.
Well, I imagine there is a lot of pressure in the courtroom. You do have to do a lot of public speaking in that case, don't you?
Yes, and it's not always of the prepared variety. Every judge, as I'm sure my colleague here will agree, very often has a different point of view on the same issue. And you may unfortunately go from one courtroom to another and get a completely different opinion from the bench on particular issues. So you have to be prepared to move and parry and thrust accordingly, even though you may have the most beautifully prepared script for your client.
Got to be on the ball. Ned, why did you become a lawyer?
Well, for quite different reasons than Chris. I wasn't diving and wasn't considering classical education. No, I always had an interest in business, and frankly, I was headed for a master's degree in business administration when I got sidetracked thinking about law, and the law degree being as useful as a business degree, but that there was even more options open to me, and decided to pursue that, well, always with the intention that I might use it in business. And finally got hooked on law as a profession really only when I was in law school, or really nearing the end of it. And then I began to practice and naturally gravitated to commercial work. And I practice as a solicitor, unlike Chris, who practices as a barrister. He goes to court, and I push paper.
What exactly do those terms mean? I'm sure a lot of viewers don't really know what solicitor versus lawyer versus barrister means.
Well, lawyer is a description of someone who practices law. It's a general label. But in England, there is actually a legal distinction between solicitors and barristers. They take somewhat different courses, and they're allowed to do different things in law. A solicitor in England is allowed to handle commercial transactions, real estate transactions, and corporations and that sort of thing, but not to go into court. Whereas a barrister is licensed to practice in the courts and would not touch solicitor type of work.
I see.
A solicitor may
It's
prepare...
almost like a surgeon versus a doctor.
Yes,
GP.
it could be. It could be viewed as specialized areas in a sense, but two very broad categories. In Ontario, we don't have the legal distinction between barristers and solicitors. So anybody who's allowed to practice law in Ontario can do either. And some people, of course, do both. But there is, for a lot of lawyers, there's a tendency to be one or the other. In my case, solicitor, in Chris's case, a barrister.
Solicitors get more dinners and better,
Right.
better perks in England, from what I understand.
Right. About law in general, what are the benefits? What are the costs? For somebody who is considering law as a profession for the first time, is it really worth it?
You mean the personal costs or the financial
Both.
expenditures?
Both. First, let's talk about the benefits.
I suppose we should be both saying, gee, they're numerous, and boy, they're this, and this.
What's the typical lawyer make?
Oh, goodness.
Well, they just came out with a survey recently in the Canadian Lawyers magazine. I don't agree with it. I think the numbers are crazy, but we're hearing the average senior partner in larger and middle-sized firms in Toronto are earning $386,000 a year. And that's quite a bit.
And Revenue Canada is very interested to hear this.
That's right. That's
So-
right. Well, you know, it actually varies a great deal. First of all, the number of years out will be a major influence. You're going to get paid less at the beginning, whether you're on your own and earning it on your own or employed in a firm. And as you move through seniority, you're likely to be making more. So, you know, if you're talking about starting lawyers nowadays, I'm going to give a broad range of maybe, you know, $30,000, $35,000 to start as an employed lawyer in a reasonable-sized firm. You can work up from there to where you have, say, middle-level partners in any of the significant firms downtown, earning certainly very close, well, $150,000 to a couple of $100,000 if they're in a successful firm. But at the upper end, you're going to find very few lawyers that are earning even $400,000, $500,000 a year. But that's quite a range of earning.
And those senior partners in some of the big firms that we needn't name, I'm sure, are already at a stage where they're not necessarily making their huge dollar amounts from simply a particular case or the numbers of cases they bring in, but the quality of the cases or the clients that they attract through their seniority and their reputation throughout the firm. So in many respects, they're being paid as an emeritus, almost solicitor, attracting type of entity within the firm. And you'll find the junior people in the firm who are champing to be on the fast track and become partners, saying, well, what's this old fogey up there doing? I mean, he just sits around and has lunch all the time at Winston's or High's or wherever it is. But the fact is that he's probably, if he attracts one case, say he pulls in X oil company as a result of all these dinners one year, and it's worth $11 million to the firm, well, it's worth a lot of money to him, too.
A lot of prestige would be associated with that.
They have a label for that type of lawyer in the firms of that nature. They call it the rainmaker. Just that's
right.
That's the label, and the rainmakers can be worth a great deal to a firm. You still need your workers underneath to get the work done, but you need your rainmakers too.
Do they tend to be a particular type of lawyer that have specialized in some particular field? Or could it really be anybody? Could it be a real estate lawyer, or could it be a
Well, you would very
entertainment lawyer?
rarely, I think, find a criminal lawyer in a firm like that having amassed that type of credential for that position. It's more likely to be a litigator or a commercial corporate
Type of lawyer.
type of.
Yeah. The nature of the rainmaker has changed over the years, though. It used to be, you know, the school tie and the connections, the old boy network. They tended to be the rainmakers. Now it's much more technocracy, if I can call it that we live in. People are attracting business based on their specialized skills. So you're finding much more skilled rainmakers than ever before, relying on their reputation as an expert in a particular field to attract work to the firm in this modern society that we live in.
A great example is my colleague to the right here, who's a known expert in the franchise area. And of course, if eventually he wanted to pack in his own lucrative practice, for example, and go into a super large firm, I'm sure he'd be able, with all respect, to name his ticket because he has established himself in a particular area.
He's carved himself a niche and made a name for himself.
Exactly.
That's the idea of being a small fish in a big pond, or a big fish in a small pond. In this case, you're
Right.
the latter, I guess.
And without family connections or anything of that nature, a person like myself can work their way up because we're in the information time, and that's what's important. Is
What do you mean
knowledge.
without family connections?
Well, I'm saying that
Like mafia?
no, but not.
Okay.
I'm saying not in the days gone by. A person who was successful in law would often be someone who joined the right clubs and who did all the networking, or came from the right families, the right part of town, or whatever. And I'm just saying that is really pretty much history now. And,
Like armchair sailors in known
yeah.
sailing clubs.
That's right.
What do you give up, though? What are the costs? To become a good lawyer. A lot of hours, I imagine.
A lot of potential liability. The Law Society, all respect to them wherever they are out there, do a great job, but if you're a sole practitioner in particular, which I was for many years, they always linger in behind you somewhere. You're afraid they're going to leap out from the bushes and say, ha-ha, you just breached rules, sub. Did you know that, in fact, there was a grant to the French crown in 1795 of a certain property that you just sold to somebody? Oh, well. So you live in terror of these things, but those are considerations that leap through your mind. It's a little bit of pressure that's always there. The larger the firm, the less this pressure affects you. It's more diffused through the various structures within the firm, and you're not so concerned with liability and perhaps more concerned with the practice of law, which is why a sole practitioner is perhaps a doomed animal unless he or she has a very distinct clientele and a lot of capital behind them to keep up with the technology and with the pressures of being as informed as one needs to be to escape liability and to do a professional job these days.
Now, I've heard rumors that if they closed the law schools for the next 5 or 10 years, they'd still have plenty of lawyers. That some lawyers coming out of law schools nowadays, just having graduated, are really having a hard time trying to find a job. Is that true?
No, actually, that trend has just recently turned around, at least in Toronto, or in Ontario, but particularly Toronto. Junior lawyers are finding no difficulty in getting work. We're a bit of an overheated economy right here in Toronto, and there's lots of work for the lawyers. That can change suddenly at any time, and certainly it's not the case for the rest of the country. But for right now, where we're sitting, it's the case. No problem getting a job.
And certainly for those who are watching this who aspire to be lawyers, you have to adopt the positive attitude that there are never enough good lawyers, and you're going to be one of them. And I think if you are, you'll always have a job. Good lawyers are hard to find, and I'm sure there are a number of clients out there that will agree with us.
Well, in your case, you had your own profession for a while, didn't you? Your own practice for 10 years?
Yes.
Why did you decide, after having tasted the flavor of being an entrepreneur, having nobody to report to, that all of a sudden you'd rather join a larger law firm again?
Well, in a sense, I didn't, because I still consider myself relatively independent where I am as a senior counsel, but definitely I'm within a larger framework, and that assists me with all the backup support and the staff and the amenities. But for no other philosophical reason, really, other than a change. You can't do the same thing, in my view, for more than 5 or 10 years without becoming stale. So without leaving the profession, I thought I'd change my point of reference. I thumbed my nose at the traditional firms when I was a younger lawyer, and I thought, well, why not give it a shot, see what's happening? And it was a good time, and I knew the person that was asking me to take this chance, so I did.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to take a short pause for a moment right now. We're going to be back in just a moment. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the legal profession, we'll be back in just a moment. We're back with careers, and today's topic is the legal profession. Have you ever considered becoming a lawyer, or you just want to know a little bit more about what lawyers do and why they charge the high prices that they do, or in many cases maybe they're very justified or very low. I don't really know enough about it. In fact, that's why we have this show. Ned, you went the opposite way. You went from a large company to a small one. Why did you do that?
Well, when I first started looking for an articling position, I had worked many years, put myself through school working for small entrepreneurial organizations. and felt that I had a fair training in the street and wanted to get a more conservative view of business, a bigger business view. And so I was able to win an articling position with one of the larger firms downtown, and dedicated myself to really learning the conservative approach to the practice of commercial law. And that was fine for articling and for about a year and a half, and then I finally realized that I was in the wrong place for myself, for my particular personality, and joined a couple of very streetwise lawyers who did a lot of deals themselves and acted for a lot of entrepreneurs, and tried that for a while, but realized that that was too much the other extreme, and I wanted a middle road, and then finally opened my own practice to do it my way, as the saying goes, and found it to be very gratifying. That was the first time that I was really content as a lawyer, when I was on my own and able to try my own ideas out and not have to answer to anyone. And since that time, I've grown with partners little by little, and we have a 6-lawyer firm now.
Okay, before you get into that in too much
Sure.
detail, how did you go about starting your own practice?
Well,
What were some of the steps that you took?
Well, the first thing was that when I went out on my own, I was practicing law for 3.5 years. I had 3 children and a mortgage, so I had to have my head examined. But I felt that I really needed that time, that space to make my own decisions. And so as I tackle many projects, as I asked a lot of people, researched as much as I could, made some guesses, and took with me one of the best paralegal secretaries the world has ever seen, and she helped me enormously to get started. And she knew more than I could ever know about office procedures and how to open the files, what filing systems to use, that sort of thing. So that one choice was a very, very wise move on my part. But also talking to other lawyers, getting help from others who were practicing on their own was also very, very good for me. And I found a lot of support from people who were either on their own as lawyers or, frankly, business people who wanted to help a young guy start on his own and get an edge.
Now, how did you attract your other 2 partners?
Well, the first one to join me, Richard Schechter, he was a very, very good friend and a classmate. And in fact, one of the things that held us back from coming together sooner was we didn't want to ruin our friendship by being partners. So,
That's a classic problem in the law.
Is it?
oh yes, partnerships, there can be a lot of stress and strain, partners growing at different paces than other partners. But as it's turned out very well for us, both on a personal level as well as a financial level, so we're content. But finally convinced him it was time for him to leave a large firm. And I guess I must have had enough conversations with him over a beer that I finally convinced him to take a shot with it. But he's also got an entrepreneurial spirit, and so finally threw his hat in with me, and we attracted the 3rd partner. There's only 3 partners in the firm. We attracted the 3rd one from the same firm that my first partner was at, and hearing of our success and wanting to make a change in his life, again, he thought it was a great idea, and the 3 of us are still partners today.
Are all 3 of you specializing in the same areas?
No, our approach is, I think there's 2 there's polarization now in law practice. You're having on the one extreme the very large firms getting larger with mergers and expansions, and then you're getting more and more small boutique type law firms, which is where we've positioned ourselves, which is that we do of course cover a lot of areas of law, but our real thrust and our marketing thrust is as specialists in our own particular area that are totally unrelated one to the other. Mine is franchising and licensing. Richard Schechter is medical legal type litigation, and Brian Schnur does estate litigation and estate matters. So totally unconnected areas of the law, but we attract our clients in our specialized niches and then feed juniors their work from our respective areas, and that's how we manage to have a lucrative practice.
Okay. Well, you have 6 lawyers now. So
6 lawyers.
So 3 more have joined.
Yeah, 3 juniors, yes,
Are
as we
they-
call them, juniors.
So they're right out of the
Associates.
law school then? Are they-
No, actually, there are various years of out from law school.
Okay. Chris, I was wondering, now you are a former prosecutor. How does that differ from being on the defense side? You've been on both sides of the fence.
I think if you look at the careers of the most distinguished, and I don't mean to include myself thereby, barristers in this province, such as G. Arthur Martin and Mr. Robinette and many others that are well known, you'll see that they traveled from one side of the courtroom to the other. They had been crowns once and then became defense counsel or vice versa. And I think many of the best courtroom lawyers, I'm not saying that it's an absolute requirement, but I think many of the best courtroom lawyers have had that dual experience, because then only can you say that you have been the real ideal lawyer, which is an officer of the court, which of course we all are technically. Most people would consider the courts as a place where there's an adversary situation going on, and they're combatants, and I'm defense, and he or she is the crown, and we're enemies. But the fact is, first of all, we're officers of the court. We all have an interest in the procedure, and we all wish to facilitate the procedure so that ostensibly the truth or justice or right or something satisfactory will emerge from the process. And so I think you better understand the entire process if you've been on both sides. And in that sense, it's saying it's neither here nor there to me that I may have prosecuted a number of druggies at one point and now I defend them. You understand their problem and the court's problem in dealing with them better for having been on both sides of it.
Is it like being in a debate? You're taking one side or the other side, and the object really is to win, isn't it? Even if you don't totally agree with the topic or the subject matter that you're debating.
I think you're partially right, but I'd like to think there's still a shred of philosophy left with me about the law, and I think that ultimately it's not a win or a loss. If your client is not convicted in a criminal situation, for example, I think that represents a failure of the state to successfully prosecute him. They simply have not discharged their onus or their burden of proof. And most of your friends will say, nice win, way to go, you got him off, quote unquote. But the fact is, the Crown failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. So I like to think that all we've done, perhaps well, is exercise the system. I think that's something that one could be proud of from time to time.
Okay. Now, you decided not to go into corporate law, despite the fact that, as you were saying before, some of these people can really make megabucks. Why not?
Why not corporate law? Well, perhaps in my particular case, I have what many might call OT background. I got some old Toronto blood in me, I suppose, somewhere. In the turn of the century, I had lots of corporate criminals in my family, and not to cast aspersions on my colleague, and I perhaps felt that area wasn't necessarily one that I wanted to leap into. I'd seen a lot of corporate history, and I felt my mouth was better used in the courtroom. So,
okay. Well, that's good. We have 3 minutes left, so just a couple of quick more questions. Maybe, Ned, tell us a bit about franchising and what does all that involve?
Well, it's an area that I gravitated to almost naturally because it appeals to my entrepreneurial spirit. There's nothing more entrepreneurial than an entrepreneur selling an idea to budding entrepreneurs, you know. And so it's a very, very interesting study of business. And what it involves, of course, is someone with a name and a body of knowledge that works well and makes money, licensing someone else, telling them the right to carry that business on for a period of time. Lots of great opportunities with it, but also a lot of pitfalls that people who are thinking about buying franchises have got to be aware of.
Yeah, well, it does take an element of risk away from starting up a business, doesn't it?
Yes, it is a safer way than starting on your own, although some of the statistics that are thrown around about the success rate with franchises are not really accurate. There is still risk in buying a franchise. Not all franchises are the same, and you have to be picky and have to do your investigation before you jump.
Okay.
does this mean that you get free pizza?
I get free just about anything, actually.
That's great. Women in law, is that on the upstart? Is that increasing, or what's the situation?
Oh yeah, I don't know the percentage, but it's increased.
I think there's 40 to 50%. I was speaking with the registrar at the Faculty of Law here in Toronto a little while ago, and he indicated it was 40 to 50%. So it's changed drastically probably since the time Ned and I were at law school.
Okay. Where are you going to be going from here? Any chance of a career change for either of you, or?
Well, with me, most definitely.
Really?
I'll probably be out of the practice of law within the next 5 to 10 years and be doing pure business, I imagine. I'm not predicting it, but that seems to be the way I'm gravitating. Yeah.
Great. How about you, Chris?
I think I could probably be reached care of General Delivery in Fiji, and I will be writing third-rate rumphole of the Toronto novels.
Why do so many lawyers tend to go into politics? Just
I
about
think-
everybody in politics seems to be a lawyer. Why is that?
Well, they're dealing with legislation, and they're
Yeah.
dealing with public speaking and representation. Really, it's just a larger client.
They're lawmakers.
Well, I guess we're pretty well having to wrap it up now. Thank you very much, Ned and Chris, for joining us on the show. We only really scratched the surface about law as a career, but maybe we're going to have another one, Law Part 2.
We'll be here.
I'm Peter Wolfl. From all of us here at the studio, thank you for watching Careers, and good luck in your own career.